I'm delighted this week to welcome to the podcast Jonathan Edgley. And Jonathan, thank you for being here. We're going to talk about some interesting stuff today. And we're going to begin I'm going to begin asking you to share with you your experience of divorce, just so our listeners get a feel for, you know what it's like. You've been touched by it. And we'll start from that. So do you want to go ahead and...
Super. Well, firstly, thanks very much indeed for having me on. It's great to be able to share my experiences with you and with your listeners, and I hope that I can help somebody to understand what they're going through my own experiences, and get them to a place of moving through it with some peace and some dignity and some grace.
That's what we're all about.
Absolutely.
We don't want wounded people going into the future. It's, we want people in a good place to enjoy their life, I think, don't we?
Absolutely. I mean, life is for living and life is for enjoying, and it's vitally important that we do that. But sometimes we need people to coach us through and support us through those times where we're not entirely sure what's going on and what is happening and why, more importantly, and we can accept the situation for what it is, and we rationalize it and justify it and just continue to move forward when we're existing rather than living.
I know. There is that thing, isn't it? It's just surviving, getting through every day that feels quite relentless at times. Quite a lot of the time, actually. And actually being able to, as you say, thrive. And, life is not for existing. And so do you want to share your experience about divorce? Tell me and tell us.
Yeah, so I mean, my experience of divorce was watching my parents get a divorce, and the ramifications for me and for my brother. I mean, I can only really talk about my own experiences because my brother's is very personal to him. But I started to realize, when I was about 13, that my parents were not entirely happy in their relationship. My father was a successful businessman, and he spent a lot of time away overseas traveling. And my mother, God bless her, she worked at a bank, was a clerk in a bank, had a lovely job, but sadly was alcoholic. So, used to see my mum in drunken stupors when I arrived home from school, and it was really, really difficult and sad to see. And I recall on numerous occasions my father carrying my mum out of a dinner party that we'd all been to over his shoulder and putting her in the car, and me asking what was going on and him saying, oh, she's just a bit tired and she needs to get her home. So, trying to protect me from it most of the time. But, as you start coming of age and start to see, and hear things, arguments, conversations between them and other members of the family, it just starts to put the piece of the jigsaw together to realize that things aren't really quite as they're supposed to be. And my point of reference, by the way, was looking at how my friends' parents existed and cohabited and love, and all of those things that would go on, or sat around the table on a Wednesday evening after school and having a good chat while having dinner, and that was something that we very rarely did. And although I had a very enjoyable childhood, don't get me wrong, we're talking specifically about my experience of divorce here, and I watched my mum and dad, drift apart very sadly, and I understand much better now as some of the reasons and rationale as to why.
Yeah.
But the experience that I had of it was a very negative one. My learning was from what I heard, not from what I was told. My parents didn't inform us of what was going on, what the situation was. I just got back one day from school, and my dad said, that's it, I'm leaving. And I'm like, hang on, why? I don't understand why you're doing this, and why you're leaving me with my mum, in this hopeless state as well, and that was that, and off my dad went, and it was a really difficult situation for everybody,
Yeah,
for
of
everybody.
course.
But I know that what happened led me to take a potentially different path in life, and I'll talk a bit more about sort of where that took me. But what I can say wholeheartedly now, that it wasn't the reason why I took this path. I look at it from a genetic predisposition perspective, as opposed to parents divorcing.
Yeah, of course. I think it's really, first, two things. Children have radars, and they have radars that know what's going on really before they even come in the room. They just know stuff. And I remember when you were just talking about your experience, I remember being 13 and kind of knowing stuff and hearing and seeing, and we didn't have the alcohol element, but there was that night where it just went bang, and you just go, it's quite a sort of a shock as well. And I think the sort of trauma from it stays with people for years and affects them moving forwards. And I think you're going to talk a little bit about your experience of that as well.
Yes, and I would agree wholeheartedly there. And we all experience trauma in different forms, and it affects us all differently in terms of our sort of systems on a mental, physical, spiritual level. And when we talk about trauma, it doesn't necessarily mean that we've got to have witnessed somebody being killed, or the terrors of war zones and those types of things. The trauma that comes from seeing our parents divorce is significant.
It is.
And we must honor our own experiences with it and seek the relevant guidance and counsel and support when it's required, because we owe that to ourselves. I mean, our parents divorcing is to do with them, not the children. We're a byproduct of that. And I think the work that you do is phenomenal in supporting and coaching families and individuals through that process. And I would have liked to have had some guidance, because at 13, 14, I had no clue. I thought I knew all about life.
We do.
Rolling with the big dogs now. I got myself into all kinds of interesting situations at school, but the system is very different to what it is now.
No.
And I think sadly, flew under the radar.
It's so interesting, isn't it? I think, I mean, you're probably slightly younger than I am anyway, but we're kind of a similar age where there was just nothing there. And we kind of walked around, and the word divorce was it was just, and even now, I mean, people even now kind of look at you and go, oh, I'm so sorry. And it's just, it's that big elephant in the room. But as a child, there really was no support at all.
No,
absolutely
not. And there was an inordinate amount of stigma attached to divorce families. I mean, it was so secretive, and it just didn't happen in that. In society, it was all done very secretively, and if we don't tell the children, maybe they'll never know.
I heard a story. I have just got to interrupt you. I heard a story the other day of a couple, right? They're in several houses, both have new partners now, and the children, even though they're older, they still don't know they're actually divorced.
Really? Yes.
What is all happening? For those of you who can't see me, I'm literally putting my hands in the air, going, "What the whatever is that all about?" Like, come on.
I know, and you know what? I've learned so much. I'm very thankful to my parents for everything that they've done for me and everything that they've taught me directly or indirectly, because
Yeah.
what I have gained is a huge amount of knowledge in my life that allows me to impart my children with my learning, and hopefully give them an insight and also a very open and honest appraisal of what's going on in our lives. And that communication for me is super important.
It is so important.
I mean, of course, there are some things that you don't tell your children until they're of an age that they can, understand
Emotionally, yeah, I agree.
Oh, absolutely. So we've got to make sure that we have, well, for me, it's about having an open dialogue, roundtable discussions, and nothing's off the table in that respect. And I think that's just so important, because I felt like I'd done something wrong. And I thought that I'd had a part to play in it, because my experience told me if somebody isn't talking to you about something, then you're part of the problem, not part of the solution.
I agree with you totally.
And that's a burden, right? And that's something that I took forward into my teenage years and into my adulthood.
And those are kind of really informative years, that's where you start building a picture of the world and what happens. And I think both you, Jonathan, and I would both say, if any of you are on the fence about, what to say to your children, or, how to have the conversation, but one of the first things you need to tell your children is absolutely it's not about them and it's about you, and really, over again reinforce that. So just in case children slip into that doubt, that, it really isn't about them.
Absolutely, completely agree with that. And I think the other thing that's really important, Tosh, is that being able to communicate rather than being secretive around such an important topic. As children, we have ears and we have hearts, so we can hear and we can feel, right? And the most crucial element for anybody is love, right? And if we're in that place where we're not feeling loved, we become really vulnerable, and we start then searching for love in all the wrong places. So by not having, and look, let's treat our children with respect. They're not daft. They can sense the vibes. They know what something's going on. And when we're asking, is everything okay, Mum? Yes, fine. Come on.
I know, but do you know what? People are still saying that to adults in the future as well, and thinking that's okay. And you go, how are you? Yeah, it's all good. It's all fine. It's sort of minimizing everything that's going on below.
100%. And teaching our children emotional intelligence is very important, and is vital to their development in growing up and understanding the value of that, totally. And being able to talk from an emotional level about how we feel, not how we think, but how we feel. They're two very different things, and intellectualizing something is very different to talking from a feelings perspective. And I often use the term, things dropping from my head to my heart. Okay, and being able to talk from that place and being able to come in it from a place of compassion and love and humility.
It is, you're absolutely right. I love that, from the head to the heart. And kind of just maybe even when you were saying that, I was thinking, and actually asking people to put their hands on their heart, it's a very, even that sort of just that physical action of connecting and feeling your heartbeat, and is just huge.
Absolutely. And I was introduced to the heart hug.
Oh,
years
I love that.
It was hugging heart to heart, because that's what real connection is.
Oh, my stomach just rumbled with that. Oh, there we go. This podcast for you. I love that. I love that heart hug. What a lovely idea. I used to do this thing with my children actually before they used to go, they were kind of like going sort of into teenagers. And I'd be like, right, we all have to have a hug. They used to line up by the front door and I used to hug them before they used to get on the school bus, and like 30-second hug. And you could just feel like after about 10 seconds, their little shoulders would go down and there'd be this really lovely sort of synergy, grounding synergy that there was just for even 30 seconds of that day. There was this, there was this heartfelt hug going on, this connection. And then, yeah, I'm not sure they always wanted to do it, but after a while they were kind of okay with it. They were like, they felt it.
But maybe they didn't at that time, but maybe that's something that they take from their childhood, that they bring into their adulthood. I mean, we talk about getting in connection rather than control.
Yeah.
Okay. And when we look at families who are going through or pre-contemplating divorce, it's we're consumed by it. We can't think further than ourselves. We are full of self, and it's, how is this going to affect me, and how's this going to affect my finances, and how's this going to affect my reputation, and how's this going to look in society?
Yeah.
How am I going to cope in business? I like wearing a wedding ring because it makes me look reliable in a business meeting. What am I going to do? How am I going to face all these things? And it's like, get out of self, right, and move into solution. And we need to widen our eyes and start to look at the potential consequences of what it is that we're considering doing.
But I do agree, when we talk about, but actually to get out of self, we need to be in there, and we need to know how we function as well, what triggers us, how we can best look after ourselves. So then we're in a place to actually go out and just.
But of course, but this is that three-pronged, okay, acknowledge, accept, action. That action is going, do you know what? I can't do this on my own. I need some help, right? I need somebody to just give me a little bit of a steer on this, because my heart is heavy, my head's full, I've got loads of stuff in there rent-free. It's not serving me positively anymore. And I know that I'm not doing a particularly good job. And that's that moving into that humility place.
Oh, totally.
Ego, control, I can do this on my own.
Humility is so powerful. I mean, when we're going through it, it can be exceptionally painful and shame, all those emotions. But actually at the end of it, the gratitude for being able to go, do you know what, I'm so glad I was able to feel all that and understand it all and use it moving forward. So what I want to talk to you about is how did your parents' divorce impact you? You've kind of sort of made brief mention about how it was for you after that. Would you like to share with the listeners?
Well, it affected me spiritually, mentally, physically, emotionally, psychologically, right? It touched every fiber of my being, right? Although I would never admit that at the time. I only ever used the divorce as an excuse for my bad behavior, for my disconnection, my disbelief, my drinking, my drug taking, my using of people, places and things, okay? When I went into secondary school, I naturally migrated to the kids from the other side of town. And it was this like dark place that was just exciting, and it got my attention and just pulled me in. I was in so much pain. I was hurting. I was upset. I felt really alone. I couldn't regulate my own emotions. I was so angry at my dad and at my mum and at my family and their friends because they didn't get me. They didn't understand me. I can't believe you're doing this to me. So, I found drink and drugs at a fairly early age because they were the only thing that stopped my head, right, from whirring away. And it was the only thing that mellowed me out and took away the pain. Okay. And so I'm at 14, 15, and as I said earlier, Tosh, I'm not saying that this was the cause of my addiction, by the way. I am very much in the frame of mind of a natural predisposition, a hereditary genetic illness on some level, of course, because I just need to look at my family tree and look at my mum and her side of the family and my dad's side of the family to say, it was slim pickings. It was always going to happen in some way, shape or form.
It was what was the trigger that was going to bring it to the fore?
We talk about a divorce being a catalyst for different kinds of things.
Yeah.
And it was a catalyst for my addiction to progress because it was the excuse I needed, right, to just go forth and do what I did. And as a result of that, I did poorly at school. I wasn't there that often. I didn't particularly enjoy it. All I really wanted to do was go out and party. I got into the rave scene fairly early on, and I loved it. It was just pure escapism.
I was going to say, I think that was probably the case for many people of our generation.
Yeah.
It was like that phone call following people down the M4 to a field you didn't know where you were going to end up in. Those are the days before the mobile phones. It was just, I don't know how we all managed to find these places.
Like homing pigeons, weren't we?
Yeah.
Pages and phone boxes. I love it. And that was my life. I honestly, I found my tribe. I found my tribe and I connected with these people, like-minded individuals who were using drugs and partying and dancing, and that was my life for many, many years. But I'd still hung on to, I had a really crap upbringing, and because my parents divorced, I was still really angry about it all. And I know now that it wasn't that. But I used it as an excuse, and my life sadly spiraled. I left school. I didn't do particularly well. I went into college, left college, got into some trouble. I won't go into the details. Had to leave the town I was in, the city I was in, sorry. And then, my father got me a job in the IT and tech space because that's where he worked. And I started in sales, and I loved sales because it was fast paced, it was moving, but I was earning money, and it just propelled my addiction forward. And that's was the story of my life, was getting and using and finding ways and means to get more. I was 18, 19, successful, earning good money, and but my life, sadly, and my view on relationship was very skewed because everything was self-serving me. It was all about me. It was never about the other person.
But that's your protection. That was that amazing, that protective shell, which, although it was protective and quite destructive as well, was there for you, because that's what happens when...
Yeah, I was always trying to outrun me.
That's exhausting, isn't it, though?
It brought me to my knees in 2006. At the age of 30, it brought me to my knees, and I went into a rehab, and I was very fortunate to go to a beautiful place over in South Africa, which my dad sent me to.
Oh, that's lovely.
Very grateful that he did. And I'm sure that, my dad carries a great burden from the divorce, because I batter him over the head with it at any opportunity. To feed my addiction, I need money. You were a rubbish father. You shouldn't have left my mother. This, that, the other. And I think, he felt that he needed to go above and beyond to then support me, and in some ways enable my addiction, because I'd be the one calling him at 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon going, yeah, Dad, I just need some money in my account. There's a couple of bills I've got to pay. And he'd send it over.
But all of this is part of the journey, isn't it? It's all part of, how we find our way to sort of becoming who we are, and it's finding those glimmers of light and the good bits, and using them rather than choosing to, sink them and to grow. And we were talking earlier before we started about, you know, the dope dealer to hope dealer, which is this amazing work that you do now as well to help people. So thank you for sharing, by the way. I really appreciate it. And thank you, really, from the heart, from the heart. Banging around my headphones here. So what I wanted to just talk to you about is, if if somebody is going through a divorce, or their parents have been through a divorce, and they're sort of stuck in they feel like they're stuck in a sort of ever decreasing box and not knowing how to get out, what would you, if, it's a big question, obviously, but if somebody was going to, if you were talking to somebody, what would be the sort of flags for maybe addiction that they might want to look at initially?
Yeah.
Or to think about, or just to sort of bring into their it's, and this is, I guess, with anything with addiction, is that, that self-blame, beating yourself up in those quieter moments for not being good enough, maybe because of marriage or whatever, you can't get life together. It's actually just be really gentle when Jonathan's talking, if you're listening, just to, this is not about blame. This is not about the fact you're a failure. It's just you're a human being going through really tough parts of life and experiences. So
absolutely, and it is a big question, and and this is where we've got to give ourselves a break, because my experience tells me that I used to beat myself up every day. I am my own worst critic. And I mentioned earlier about trying to outrun my shadow, which is what I did for many years, and anybody that's struggling with when I look at this from two sides, and I look at this from somebody who's maybe struggling with an addiction, that's in a marriage and maybe wants to get out of the marriage for all the wrong reasons, and I can relate to that too, because that's something I considered doing, and thank God I didn't, because my wife is a beautiful person who helped me significantly in my addiction, continues to do on a daily basis.
Oh, lovely.
Genuinely, I don't know where I'd be without her.
Oh, lovely.
She helped get back into recovery after a relapse. And but I thought that the best way out, because I didn't understand what was going on, the best way out for me was to divorce my wife, because she didn't understand. She didn't get me. She didn't understand what was going on. She didn't understand the pressures of work and being a CEO, and what I needed to do to just get through that evening, which was generally with a bottle of wine and a couple of beers in the pub on the way home. And I was becoming really secretive, and I was manufacturing an exit, right? And in doing that, I was sort of seeking things in other places, even in the confines of my own mind, which, looking back now, were real telltale signs. But I was so scared, I didn't know what to do, and I didn't know who to talk to. And my wife on the other side, I learned later, was also, due to how I was behaving and how I was being, was also planning her exit.
Oh my goodness.
There was no communication.
Well, we don't have a blueprint, do we? We don't have, if we've, never been through it, how do we do it?
Well, we were coexisting. We were in the same house. I was doing my thing. She didn't understand me. I didn't understand her. It was just a real sad state. But what my wife did was ensure that the children were protected as best they could from me and my behavior, because how I was being, I was venomous in my communication. I felt so bad about myself that the only way I could remove some of that was to be horrible to her. We hurt people.
Yeah.
And I was hurt and I was wounded. I'd still got lots of legacy burdens that I'd not dealt with from my own childhood, that I was now projecting into this space. I was following the same behaviors, the learned patterns that I'd taken on, that weren't for me, but it's what I knew and what I believed was right, was to get out, was to exit.
It's that runaway, isn't it? Self-sabotage, just...
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. you know, and looking at how I drank, how I manipulated. I was the master of manipulation. You know, I would be able to spin anything in a way that impacted somebody else negatively. You know, I was secretive. My behaviour was off key. My alcohol consumption increased. My time at the pub was growing. My meetings after hours was growing. You know, all of these things that I was doing. My weight, I ballooned. You know, I became aggressive in my nature. You know, my whole demeanor changed.
Get thrown a whole lot of self-loathing as well.
Well, and I didn't want to, you know, the kids became a burden.
Oh.
I have to say it as it is. And I say it as it is because this is my experience, and there might be somebody out there who's going through a similar situation. And I tell you that because it changes. It can change.
So what can I ask you? And obviously the burning question maybe from others who are listening to you, and thank you so much for sharing, is what precipitated the change? That, you know, what was there a defining event where your wife went, right, actually, do you know what, I've had enough of this? Or did you suddenly wake up one day and just go, you've got to stop?
Wow. And I'm, you know, yes, there was a moment. There was some divine intervention. I can only call it that. My life got to a point where my wife asked me to leave the family home. I was in an apartment on my own. It was a really difficult and dark time. And I thought I'd won the lottery, you know, sadly, being on my own. I thought, this is it now. This is great. I'm just where I want to be. You know, and it was a really, really sad time, you know, for my wife and for my children and for me. I managed to get myself back into the family home, and my wife was relentless in saying, you are alcoholic, you need help, right? You need help. I'm here to help. And she tried many, many different things. And then one morning, I got out the shower, I went back into the bedroom, and she said, I just can't do this anymore. I cannot do this anymore. And you need to either get help or I'm out. With every fibre of my body, Tosh, I wanted to say, no, I'm fine, leave me alone. And I said, you're right, I do.
I'm all goosebumpy as you said that.
And we, without sounding too cheesy, we embraced, we both fell to the floor, we were crying, and I was in an AA meeting by midday. And that was 7 years ago.
Amazing. Like, I'm sure we're all feeling this as well. Thank you. It's the courage to be vulnerable, isn't it? And finding.
I don't know where it came from. I don't know where it came from.
I think divine intervention is a very good way of putting whatever happens sometimes to us for whatever reason. Those moments of clarity, and you just go, wow, where did that come from? It's like looking at words that come out of your mouth sometimes, and you're looking at them, you're speaking them, going, wow, where is this coming from? And they're defining moments which can make the difference. And thank you for sharing that. Wow. So Jonathan, thank you. Amazing story. An amazing, lovely wife as well for
absolutely
saying what she did. So if anybody is in a place and they can relate to what Jonathan has been talking about, or parts of what Jonathan has been talking about, what would you suggest that they do to move forwards and to help themselves? And obviously I'm going to ask you to share your details, and I'll put them in the show notes as well. So
thank you.
Pleasure. Well, of course.
I would say to anybody that's going through something similar to what I've just described there, that, you know, it's really important to know that there is a way out of it. That life doesn't have to continue in the way that it does. I can only say that I was full of fear. I was so scared. Fear kept me locked in that cycle of drinking and you know, really negative behavior. And fear was described to me as face everything and recover, or F everything and run. And I'd done a lot of running, Tosh, but I'd had enough. I was exhausted. And I think what I would say to anybody who's in that place of exhaustion, have a conversation with somebody. You've got nothing to lose in having the conversation, right? We suffer from an illness potentially, and you know, alcohol, drugs, prescription medication, sex, exercise, buying,
shopping, everything.
All of the things that we do to change how we feel, right? If we're doing them and we can't control them, i.e. we are experiencing powerlessness over them.
Yeah.
And when we do those things, that our life becomes unmanageable, i.e. we self-loathe, we're full of fear again, right? It's not impacting us positively. It's a negative experience.
And they're short-term hits as well, aren't they? They're
costly, they're short-term. And I've never seen anybody get better from an addiction without professional intervention, sadly. And I'll share this with you. You know, I watched my mother die of this illness, and I buried her 6 years ago. Right? She just couldn't come through it. And in her death, she gave me the greatest gift. Right? And that was that I cannot beat this on my own. Right? I cannot do it. I need help. I surrender to win.
It's so true. It's so true. I love everything you've got to say, and thank you. It's okay to ask for help.
Absolutely.
It is absolutely okay to ask for help, no matter what. And I know both Jonathan and myself are here in whatever capacity we're in to help you. And Jonathan, where can we find you?
So I'm at Sanctum Healthcare. We provide coaching and services and all kinds of wonderful things for people suffering with drug and alcohol addiction. You can get me on email, and we'll share the details of that, I'm sure, later. But all I would say is I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram, I'm everywhere really. But
you're not hiding, that's for sure, which is good.
No, really not. And if anybody ever wanted a conversation in confidence, very discreetly, you know, just pick up the phone and do that. I'd be really happy to talk to anybody out there that's looking for some guidance. And that's what it is, guidance.
Yeah, it is. It is. Because ultimately you have to walk through that door, isn't it?
100%. Courage to change. You know,
totally. Thank you. Thank you so much. It has been an inspiring and amazing conversation. And I'm so grateful to you for being on here and just being so open and honest. So thank you, Jonathan, for being here.
Thanks, Tosh. It's the only way to go.
Yeah, it is indeed. Thank you.